Well, thank you, Congresswoman Stefanik and Chairwoman Stefanik, and I want to acknowledge our leadership, particularly Speaker Johnson and Whip Emmer and Chairwoman Stefanik for holding this hearing today, and of our members, witnesses here today, and particularly from law enforcement. Thanks for your service and dedication to our country. I never thought I would say this, but many communities in Illinois are now border towns. If you go back 3 years ago, there was no border crisis when we left the Trump administration. Today, there's a border crisis in Illinois. And when I look at the failed policies that we're seeing from Democrats here in Washington and Democrat-controlled states like New York and Illinois, it's happening everywhere. And as Chairwoman Stefanik talked about, my district covers part of the Chicagoland area. And so I have the excerpts of Chicago. And last week I traveled throughout my district, and the number one issue that I heard was from local municipal leaders, mayors, police chiefs, community leaders, small businesses that have all been affected by the border crisis and the impact that it has had on our communities. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson support radical sanctuary cities, soft on crime policies, and these have hamstrung our police force and are only exacerbating the crisis in our state. Over 17,000 migrants have arrived in Chicago since August of 2022, with many being sent to communities outside the city because of overrun resources. We have seen increases in retail and violent crime, with police resources being diverted and spikes in the flow of drugs throughout our communities. In a former life, I was a federal prosecutor. And as a federal prosecutor, I prosecuted immigration cases, sent people back to the country of origin, and enforced the rule of law. That was under an administration, the Bush administration, that enforced the rule of law when it came to immigration. This is an administration that refuses to do that, and we're seeing the consequences of that. Particularly in Chicago in the recent months, I've also seen the low morale with our police force because of what they have to deal with. In addition, recruiting numbers for our police force in Chicago at an all-time low because of the radical open border, soft on crime policies being implemented by the Biden administration, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and mayors like Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Now, we should all be compassionate, but we are a country based on the rule of law. And until we enforce the rule of law, end radical sanctuary city policies, and secure the border, every community, big and small, rural, suburban, and urban, will feel the impact of this crisis. And we will continue to see the deterioration of our great cities like Chicago and New York. With that, I have a question that I'd like to ask Sheriff Chapman. Sheriff Chapman, as I just mentioned, in Chicago, we've seen firsthand the increased use of drugs and crime. How have American sheriffs been impacted by what you're seeing in terms of increased crime and the influence of the cartels bleeding into our communities?
Well, thank you for that question. And I would say to one of the comments that you made, I think every state in the union has become a border state. I can tell you, the fentanyl problem especially is impacting everybody. And as we know, last year, 107,000 overdose deaths, and 70% of which were fentanyl related. The year before that, I think it was like about 100,000, a little bit in that area. And what we're seeing is they're constantly going up. What concerns me and what I'm seeing, even in a place like Loudoun County, where I'm from, which is one of the safest counties in the nation. In fact, Bloomberg had us as the safest county in the nation about a year and a half ago. Even with that, we're seeing an uptick in fentanyl-related issues, and certainly with the youth. What we're seeing now with fentanyl overdoses, where I would say a couple of years ago we were seeing 25 to 35 age bracket. Before that, maybe 20 to 35. Now we're seeing it 15 to 20 years old. And in fact, in just a 3-week period, back in September, out of one high school district, we had 9 overdoses, and we had 4 of those that actually happened at school, in which CPR and other first aid had to take place. So even in states and localities where you would think it's pretty safe, the impact of fentanyl is significant. everywhere. And I would say from our standpoint, that's impacting everybody across the country, especially on the border. Now, working with our border sheriffs and knowing many of them down and what they have to deal with, just the resources that they're taxed with because of all the people that are coming across the border and the extra work that it takes just to do that, to do the job that they have to do is just outrageous. So I think it's very tough across the board. We're doing the best we can with the resources that we have. It can be demoralizing to law enforcement when you don't feel like you're getting the support that you need to do your job, and so I think we're doing the best we can with what we have, but it's a very important question, and we're doing everything we can to try to combat that.
Well, thank